to the cloud.
Oh, thank you, Kristen. So welcome to the webinar, third in our series of advancing the AT process. This one is on AT in the IEP. My name is Linda Daly, and I'm an AT specialist with the Special Education Technology Center. Sorry, I do know the name of our agency.
And Kristen Leslie, the director here at the Special Ed Tech Center.
And so most of you have probably been in this series that we've been doing. We started it in the fall, and then we restarted it this winter in January, talking about the AT process from consideration all the way through implementation and professional development. We'll get into later in the spring. This series of webinars, we wanted to dive deeper into looking at the quality indicators for assistive technology by the QIAT group, and we are using their book as our material, but all of this material is also available at their website. And what we're hoping is that teams will be able to take this material, evaluate how they're doing using the matrices that we will show you, and then set some goals for things they can improve on, look at the things they're doing well and build upon that, and just use this as a way to move their processes forward. The objectives specifically are that you will learn how to evaluate your processes for including AT in the IEP used within a team or a school and or a district, that you will be able to identify specific behaviors to improve those processes for including AT in the IEP, and also that we're going to help equip you with resources to support those improvements. And the first thing we thought we would do is just ask you, how does your district include AT in the IEP? So is it a certain section of it? Does everybody do it differently? How does that look in your district? And you can share either verbally or you can share in the chat, whatever's easiest for you. All right. Whoops. Okay, does anybody want to share how you include AT in the IEP? What section it's in?
Lots of different places depending on the person, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Okay. Well, we actually,
okay, we have 12 different districts in our SELPA. Each one is a little different. Definitely in the special factors and accommodations.
Okay, great, thanks. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about in this, is that there is no one specific place that it needs to be included. It actually, depending on the situation, should be included in different places. We did a survey of the state at our December, did we do it at the meeting or we sent it out earlier? But we did a survey in the state. I'm going to let Kristen talk about that a little bit, so that you can show the results for the state of Washington.
Yeah, so Linda's on and she helped create this survey, and we've done it over the years. And one of the questions is, within your district, where are accommodations most often documented in the IEP? And so this just kind of highlights what the responses were to that question. And so the most frequent response was accommodations page, and then special consideration page. I'm not remembering if they could answer 2 places or if it was just a single answer on that one. Because I bet, as Linda mentioned in the chat, many of us may document in several places.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any questions about that or any comments they want to make?
This is Teresa. I'll just comment that we always put AT in the special considerations, and we always put AT in the accommodations. And then if it's academic AT, it's usually a description of it. Maybe it's not named, but a description of it is put in the present levels.
Mm-hmm.
section of the IEP of what the student is doing. And then if it's AAC, it may also be in the present levels under the communication, well, we don't label it anymore, but in the communication section where we give a description of it, we don't name it.
Right.
And I know a lot of people don't do that. You know, you don't know from year to year if you're going to have access to it, and you put that name down there and you're required to. So,
Right.
you know, if we put speech generating device with dynamic screen display and robust vocabulary, most people know what you're generally talking about. If it's a school device, it's going to be some type of tablet. But those are, that's the other place that we often see it written in, but by description.
And can I comment on that in response?
Sure.
Please do.
So we're kind of the opposite in that in present levels, we name the specific device because it's what the student is actually using at that time. And the problem with not naming it anywhere in the IEP is that if the student moves, they may end up with a totally different speech generating device or app or whatever if it's not named. But that's the only place we name the device so that you have other options.
I agree with
for
that.
Trying.
Yeah, I agree with that actually. It's just, this is what I'm told to do.
Yes.
Named. And we actually, I'm on the East Coast. I'm the one from the East Coast.
Right.
And we do get transfers of students in, and this is apparently a state thing because we get people that come in from another district within the state, and it gives us description. So it's like, okay, what are they using? Are they using Proloquo? Are they using Avaz? What exactly are they using? And so oftentimes there's some telephone calls that need to be made that we can clarify it. So we have had some that come in from another state, very rarely, but every once in a while it'll come in with the app or the device named.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. And even the South Carolina Department of Education says there's not any harm in naming that, but the districts do not, they tend to be very against it.
I think there's some fear with districts, and sometimes it's the administrators saying don't name specific things. This feeling that there may be some kind of obligation around purchasing it, which is probably the case if you've done those trials and gone through the process of determining that specific device or product, then there's probably a good reason for that if there's been the assessment. We have in the chat someone saying they agree with the statement of naming the device. And then another person commenting, we usually add something like word prediction, such as co-writer or read and write. So they're giving the name of the type of assistive technology with some suggestions. I fear that not naming something, especially when the assessment has occurred and the trials have occurred, then you kind of go back to, okay, we're going to need to trial what our district has, the district that the child has landed in, and redo some of that assessment process.
And that's such a waste of time for the student.
Yes.
I mean, when they have something that's working for them, and then just because the knowledge is not shared it's right. Not a good, to me, it's just not a good situation. I disagree with that point, but that's what I'm instructed to do.
And especially in the present levels where what you're really just saying is what's happening currently. So it doesn't even feel to me like you're obligating somebody else because you're really just saying what's currently happening. But one thing I do like is that there's enough of a process that you're being given direction of how they want you to do it. So that piece of it's good. So
we've got an interesting comment in the chat that California just passed a law that allows students to take their assistive technology with them from district to district for up to 2 months. I believe that she was thinking that was the amount of time. But wouldn't that be interesting where you take your device and be using that and be kind of showing the use of that and then go from there.
And give the other district time to get it if they need to.
Yeah.
We actually had that happen last year. A student came from the Seattle district and brought her device from Seattle on loan until we could get one, which was really great.
That's great. I love to hear districts working together for the best interest of the student.
Yeah.
So, okay, any more comments on that? What we want to look at next, actually, we really all kind of talked about, so which is great. First, when we look at the indicators for how the quality indicators that talk about how we should implement this as putting the AT in the IEP, there are 5 indicators, I believe. I think there's 5, and I should know that off the top of my head.
Yes, there are 5.
There are 5. All of a sudden I was like, is that correct? And so they are written to address that provision of the written guidelines. So the second one is about ensuring that the needed AT services are not overlooked in the IEP. The third indicator asks the reader to look for the connection between the AT and the achievement of the IEP goals and the progress in the general education curriculum. So we want it documented how these are connected. And then the 2 remaining indicators are about the clarity of that provision of AT devices and services. So indicator 4 asks the reader to determine if the statements are related to observable and measurable outcomes. And indicator 5 focuses on the overall IEP and how clearly it explains and describes the AT devices and services being provided. So that's what we're really looking for when we include it, is we want that big picture. We want the big picture of how that AT is going to help that student meet their goals and progress in general education curriculum. But then we want it specific enough that we really understand why the AT is needed, what environments it's needed in. It is not dictated by the law does not dictate where it needs to be, other than the only place it is dictated is you have to at least say it was considered. But beyond that, it's not dictated where it needs to be in what specific section. So it's really the job of the IEP team to describe the use of the AT wherever it makes the most sense. And there are many ways to do it well. And that's what we talked about. You know, all of you said it depended on the student, it depended on the school, that there are many ways to do it well. In effective IEPs, the type of AT that the student requires and the manner in which it will be used is clearly described, so that all the participants in the IEP, including the parents, will understand how the AT will be used. This is going to include not just the devices, but the services that will be provided to support the use of those devices. So we need to make sure we also include those services in the AT, and that includes the training services, both for the student to use it. It may be training for the parents and the staff to use it. So that all needs to be described and communicated clearly in the IEP. There's one thing that I think bears noting at this point is with UDL and the prevalence of UDL now, which is wonderful, we have so much technology available to the entire student body, not just students who need it for specifically for their education program, that it can be easy to think, well, they have that available, we don't need to include it in the IEP. But it's still very important that if your student needs that and it's been determined they need it, that even though it's readily available to everybody, we still need to document it in the IEP that that student needs it. So did you want to add anything to that, Kristen?
Nope, that sounds good.
Okay, and then did you just want to talk a little bit about the special factors that we had talked about on page 69?
Yes, well, so what I was going to mention here is that it's important for the documentation to show a process Is that where you were going, Linda? I was thinking about that on page 69.
Yeah.
And so while the minimal compliance for considering AT in that special factors area may be to check yes or no on your IEP form, that doesn't show a process. So this kind of points back to chapter 2, where it talks about consideration processes and then documenting sometimes what was tried but not needed, so that that's shown as the process.
Right. So, okay, thank you. So,
Say something about that?
please
Yes.
do. Yes.
So I kind of, rather than having, in Bellingham School District, rather than having a big AT manual, which no one ever actually reads, I kind of have a one-page process with links to the documents, the guiding documents that help people through the process.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried to build evidence of the process into the request form that people use to ask for AT for a student after they've done their trials.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to say who on the team was involved in making the decision. They have to say what IEP goal or objective is related to that AT. What objectives will the student be able to make better progress in because of it? I'm trying to think what else, but basically the process is built into the request form, so they have to have gone through the process to get that request filled out.
Okay.
Is that form one of the ones you've loaded into our up on our
Yes.
system? Would this be a good
Yep.
time to go look at that, what you're talking about, Linda? We could do that if you would
Sure.
like. Okay.
Okay.
So, and that way you can see where it is also. So, Kristen, is that on our new website? Can we get to that?
I think it links back to your Google Doc. So if that's where it is, where you have the process.
Okay.
So hopefully this will be a test, and you guys can see our temporary site here.
Right. So the AT process. So this is just our site. And hopefully you've all seen our new temporary site, and we have AT process here. And we have AT process forms, Washington State School Districts. And we should have Bellingham AT process. And then which form would that be? The request
And then if you go to the overview docs and go to the last one, AT process overview.
Okay.
So that's the one-page document I was talking about that shows the process of AT consideration, and it was there for a minute and then it went away.
You know what? I'm opening it up in Google Docs so I can get it bigger. So what you were seeing was just a preview. So this way it'll come up.
Okay, gotcha.
So
Great.
I don't know. For my eyes, it was a little small. So it'll just take a minute because, you know, being on the webinar, we're using a lot of my Wi-Fi. So, but it should come up here. There it is. So, okay. So, and Linda, if you want to say anything about it, feel free.
Yeah, so it says there, the following are the processes related to the AT decision making. And if you scroll down, then there's some overview docs, and then AT consideration, which it says must occur at every IEP meeting.
Mm-hmm.
The consideration form is another example of where the process is kind of built in.
Mm-hmm.
But then it talks about AT documentation in the IEP, AT assessment, and then the AT request forms. And the request forms is what I was talking about, but you can't click on these links. It won't work because those docs are in my SharePoint. So you have to go back to the folder.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And and
Okay,
open.
that's where they are. Right. I saw those.
So Linda, is your AT in the IEP similar to the QIAT one, just tweaked?
Yes,
for
I
Bellingham?
just modified it a little bit.
Okay.
I didn't put every single spot in the IEP on it. I tried to narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is what Linda means. So the consideration doc, the assessment doc, the request form, they're all in here. So yeah, so thank you. So one of the reasons I wanted to walk you through me getting to it is so you could see that all of you have access to that. So we've built this so that you would all have access to that. So, and then since we are specifically talking about AT and the IEP, here is the planner that QIAT provides. And so they, you know, here's the questions that you can ask. Does the student currently use AT devices to participate and make progress in the general ed curriculum? And then for what tasks is AT used? Is AT effective in completing these tasks? In what environments is AT used? Are AT services currently being provided? Are there additional tasks for which AT might be effective? Well, then you come over here and it says document in this section, present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. So you ask the question and then it gives you ideas for where to document it. So, and that's pretty, so you have some of that like that in your document too, correct, Linda?
Yes.
Okay.
I like the second one because you noticed in Washington when we asked that question, no one put in the goal section, although some put a combination. So that could mean that some put it in the goal section, but there, does the student need AT devices and services to accomplish an annual goal? Then it may be part of the annual goal to mention how they're. Yeah, and
when I think of that as the context. So, or the conditions, I mean. So when the student is given an assignment and a word processor with word prediction, they do 5 sentences and blah, 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 you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So great. So this is a resource. Bellingham, Linda has some excellent resources. I love the way you've actually written those out in that process form. So and these are available to you as resources for making your own plan for how you want to do this. So
does everyone know where to find this, or is this, do we go over this later, Linda, how to find this?
We do go over this later. But,
so we'll let you know where to find this.
So,
and download it to kind of customize it for your own use.
Right, right. And you can get to it from our website going to the process forms. So, okay. But I do have a link directly to these also in the PowerPoint. So you can get to them that way too. So, and I just, while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and take you to the QIAT site. I believe all of you have gone to it by now and probably all of you knew about it, but so it's quality indicators for assistive technology, and you can go to their resources and their resource bank and then the resource home. And that's where you're going to find all of that information that we were just talking about. The book we are going from actually has almost all of the information from that book is in these guiding documents. So the book is really these guiding documents turned into paragraphs. One of the things that's in the book that is not in the guiding documents that I think makes the book worth purchasing is great examples. They have case studies in the book that really give some good examples of real life, how you can live these out. So I just think that they have excellent examples in the book. And so that's not in these guiding documents, but the information is. And then that form I just showed you, the AT and the IEP planner is here under Quiet in Action. That's where they have all those forms we've been sharing with you. Now I have put them in a Google folder that you can access directly, but I want you to see that you could get to them from their website also. The other thing we can get to is the actual indicators. So
it's great that they give you the Word document so you can modify it too. That's very helpful.
Yes, yes. And then the indicators and the matrices are right here. And so I'm just going to go ahead and pull them up. And we're just going to go straight to the indicator, the matrices for including it in the IEP. So I'm going to very quickly go back to the spreadsheet just to, to my PowerPoint, just to make sure we haven't missed anything, but I think we're going to look at the indicators. Okay, we're good. Just want to make sure I didn't have anything I was missing there. So when we go to these, you'll see the indicators will go through. Here's consideration, and then it was assessment, and now we are on including in the IEP. And I'm just going to make this bigger so you can actually see it. I'll make it as big as I can.
That's great, right?
Okay. So, so if we look at the very first indicator, if we're just going to go through this, because this is what we want you to be able to do, is be able to use these indicators to really evaluate and where your team is. And you can do this as you yourself, how you feel like you're doing, how your team is doing, how your school's doing, how your agency's doing. You know what makes most sense for you to be evaluating at this current time. So, so Kristen, since I've been doing all the talking, would you like to read this?
Yes, and I was going to say this is a very nice way to approach administrators around some need for professional development in a certain area of AT, because you have this tool that helps evaluate where you are in different processes. So for this in particular, documenting in the IEP. So we have the special number 1, first indicator, the education agency has guidelines for documenting AT needs in the IEP and requires their consistent application. And so you go from 1 acceptable to 5 promising practices. So 1, you have the agency does not have guidelines for documenting AT in the IEP. And 2, the agency has guidelines for documenting the AT in the IEP, but team members are not aware of them. And 3 being the agency has guidelines for documenting AT in the IEP and members of some teams are aware of them. And 4 being the agency has guidelines for documenting AT in the IEP and members of most teams are aware of them. 2, the agency has the guidelines for documenting AT in the IEP and members of all teams are aware of these.
So as you think about your team, whichever piece of your team you're thinking, go ahead and just write that. And if you could put it in the chat, it looks like maybe some people have.
I think not yet. So the idea is thinking about your district or your teams, giving yourself a rating on where your district might be at with this.
Or your school, if that makes more
Sure.
sense for you to do that. And then if you feel comfortable sharing it and explaining why, that I think that's helpful if we talk about why we feel like we fit in there, and then we can, go from there.
So we've got some 3s. So agencies having guidelines and documenting in the IEP, but only some teams are aware, to having a 4, most teams are aware. So
I think it's really hard when there is no required PD for everyone to have everyone be aware, no matter how many ways you try to make it available.
yeah.
There's going to be people that are missing out, and that's frustrating.
Right. I was going to ask how you did make people aware of it. If, what are some of the ideas you've used to make people aware of it?
We have it in our special ed manual for staff. We have it, we send out a Friday word every week, and then we've done it a couple of times on that. We have web pages, AT web pages, face-to-face trainings, online trainings. So that's as much of it as I've come up with so far.
Yeah, those are great ideas, though. Can you tell us about the Friday word? I think I like the sound of that.
It's just a little weekly newsletter that the special ed TOSAs put out, and it's about a topic every week, and a couple of times they've featured the AT process and where the forms are located and that kind of thing.
Okay, great, thanks. And for those of you not in Washington State, I don't know if TOSA is a Washington State word, but I'm sure you have something like it, teacher on special assignment. So, thank you. And it says that somebody said they don't think they have guidelines other than the state and federal laws, but many people are including AT in the IEP, but not all, and they're working on this. So hopefully that gives you, Linda had some great ideas. Maybe that will give you some good ideas about how you can get that word out. And so does anybody have anything else they'd like to ask about this indicator or share about this indicator?
One thing I've shared before is that when I was in a district, asking the director if I could pull, 20 random files and look at documentation, and it was very minimal what I found for documentation, just randomly pulling. And then, so that's one way, because in order to gain that opportunity for PD, knowing that that's an issue or for the district, that's a nice way to show, oh, this is what we actually have. And hopefully you find out that you're more a 4 or 5 when you see that people are documenting in there. They know to document. So,
right. That's great.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to mention about IEP Online, which we use in Washington is, or most of us do, I think, is that you can have a report on accommodations for testing, I think it is. But you can't necessarily pull a report on those other areas where it might be common unless you have it do a custom report. You can set up custom reports, I guess. And so I've been thinking about being a little more directive about places. People put it in the IEP, maybe 3 places or 3 different places, suggesting 3 or 4 places, and then having customized reports set up for those so we can actually pull what information about what kids are, how many kids are using what.
Yeah.
And in your district, Linda, you actually are an AT specialist hired for the special ed department, correct?
Yes. Actually, it's kind of joint between the special ed and the ed tech department.
So that district is very, first of all, they're very forward thinking to have that. It's great. And then that's a benefit that those departments have, that you actually have that time dedicated for that. So that's great.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, whoops, I was going to move it up to the next one, but it went too far. Just a second. I was going to go to just that second indicator, but it took me a little far. Okay. Oh, I think I went down the wrong direction.
Assessment.
Yeah, sorry about that. Your screen looks a little different than mine. I have some extra things on my screen that you don't see on your screen. And so I'm just trying to get to that. And then Kristen, if you want to read that one, I'll get it.
Maybe I'll go ahead and read the indicator and then let you guys look across from 1 to 5 and give yourself a rating. All services that the IEP team determines are needed to support the selection, acquisition, and use of AT devices are designated in the IEP.
So, and again, this one's about the services, not just the devices. So.
I'll go ahead and rate when I was in a district about where we were at, while you guys are thinking about where to rate. So about a 2 or 3 is one of the responses.
Okay. And then I see another 3. Yeah.
I think we're better about documenting the device than we are about what's needed around to support that student and that staff in implementing the device. So I think we often miss out on the services needed, whether that's training or other things. If you are documenting services in the IEP, does that tend to be training, or what other types of things?
And in addition to that, could you just also say where you're documenting it?
So maybe
I'm not, because I don't use IEP online personally, I forget what the parts are, but I was thinking supplementary aids and services maybe is where some people document that. Would that be a logical place, or?
That's what we did. That's what I was thinking as well.
And that's what we did in this district I was in also.
Okay, should we go on to 3?
Sure.
Okay, the IEP illustrates that AT is a tool to support achievement of goals and progress in the general curriculum by establishing a clear relationship between the student's needs, AT devices and services, and the student's goals and objectives. As you're thinking about where you fall in your teams or district, this again points back to the strength of your consideration process. Mm-hmm. And if you have something like the consideration form by QIAT, then you've identified the goal areas and you're considering based on those areas of need. And so then it's easy to document where that assistive technology supports a student in meeting goals or accessing curriculum.
Mm-hmm. I found in our district, the district I was in, this one, we did pretty well. And I think part of it was because I was like Linda, where I was the AT specialist. And so I had kind of a funky role in that I was just an AT specialist. I wasn't the teacher. I wasn't one of the, the OT or the SLP. And so when I would help them do the evaluation, the consideration, the evaluation, they were the practitioners who were writing the goals. So it was obvious they had to put it into their goals to say it needed to be done, because I couldn't be writing it in, so it needed to get connected to their goals in order to get it put in there. So and so that piece of it worked actually pretty well. We did pretty well in that district, but like you said, Kristen, we'd gone through the process, so that's why.
I think the connecting it to the goals and objectives is pretty straightforward, but to progress in the general curriculum, I think sometimes you don't see that direct link.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
I'm wondering if you see that more on that accommodations page where you're talking about how they need information, how they need to receive information.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. That's a good place for it.
Yeah. And we often put it in there because that was one place I could add to the IEP. I wouldn't write in the general other sections, but I could write in that section. So that was often in there. So. Okay. And then on back on number 2, we did have someone in the chat who also said that when they provide, when we're talking about support and services, that when they provide PD teachers, SLPs, OTs, and other staff, then they write it into the services to be provided. So that again was in the services section. So, okay, I think today we want to keep going through these because I think we're good on time, so we can go on to the fourth
Finish
one.
the last 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so IEP content regarding AT use. Did I read that right? IEP content regarding AT use is written in language that describes how AT contributes to the achievement of measurable and achievable and observable outcomes. So the previous one was how it ties to goals and access to curriculum. Someone might have to help me with the.
These are kind of very similar.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of break these apart.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. So
maybe we'll go on to 5 since those
Right.
are so similar. I think we discussed it.
right.
So AT is included in the IEP in a manner that provides a clear and complete description of the devices and services to be provided and used to address student needs and achieve expected results.
Mhm.
So clear and complete.
Mhm.
We're not just checking yes and writing down a device, but maybe we are including that in the goals, weaving it into the goals where it's necessary. Maybe at times then it being appropriate to have a more detailed description in a section, present level section, like communication with AAC. So clear and complete.
And I think this can also talk about how we considered it, and if we decided it wasn't needed, that's in there too. So that could go under this one, I think, also.
And why, right?
Correct. Okay, we have a 3 and 4.
I think often when we're talking about, all in the consideration process, everything leads to documenting it properly, right? And often administrators think of that as, well, to avoid legal issues later or whatever. But really, all of this is for documenting clearly so that the student benefits from what's already been done, already been proven to be useful, so that they can just continue year to year having the assistive technology they need, and having that documented clearly so that between teachers, between schools, we're not rehashing something that's already been discovered, although at times we know we do need to reconsider what's needed in different settings. But that I feel like is more the heart of why we need to document clearly.
Right. And since there were only 5 indicators this time, I think we can go ahead and look at some of the resources a little bit more. So I'm going to just take you back out to the PowerPoint, and I have been mailing the PowerPoints out to you. So in this, I've given you the guiding document for including it. So that was the information that I showed you and is also in the book. The indicators and the matrices, and then the AT planning document. And this link will actually take you to the website, because I wanted you to be able to find these from the website. But I also later on give it to you a link that goes straight out to a Google folder where I've put these in. And so that's right here. And if we just click on that, you'll be able to go to that, and it'll take just a minute to go to it. But that's where you'll see this Google folder. and you'll see the webinar on consideration, the one on assessment, and here's the one on AT and the IEP. And if we click on that, you'll see I have the PowerPoint from today, the IEP planner, and the guiding document. So they're all right there. And then if you go back to this main process webinar, you'll see I have the indicators in both forms, the Word and the PDF. I have the matrices summary, which just lists them all together. And you can just take your rating you did and put it right here. And then you'll have it all together. And when Kristen was talking about taking things to your administrators, this can be a way you can show them, you know, look, we're doing great here, but we could probably use some more processes or training on these areas. One of the other things they have, though, is they actually have a worksheet. And I'm going to pull that up. The PDF pulls up a little easier, but they have it in the Word form, where again, you can put your rating here, but then you can list your strengths in this area, your greatest challenges, and then what actions you want to do to lower those barriers to improvement. So this can actually be your improvement plan. And so you can use that, and it goes through each one of the matrices. And here's our assistive technology documentation IEP, and you can just do that right here. So I've listed those right in this AT Processes webinar folder that you had the link to. And then at the bottom of that, I have web resources for best practices in AT. And what I've done here is I've just, actually, I'm gonna just open it. I'll just open it with Google Docs here so I can make it a little bigger. We refer to these so often that I thought, let's come up with a place where you can find them all in one spot. So I've actually just listed the websites for several AT sites, the Georgia Project for Assistive Tech, the QIAT site, our site, our YouTube channel, Joy Zabala's set, and then the Wisconsin, what we often talk about is the Waddy site, and University Kentucky site. And then this Washington District's AT Forms and Procedures, this is where you'll find those Bellingham forms that Linda so graciously shared, plus forms that districts from all over Washington have shared. And then here's actually our, this is shared assessment forms from various AT providers. I just really like this one. There is a group out of the Midwest that had some great forms that I found to just do assessments, and they were pretty quick to fill out that you could give to your OTs, your teachers, your parents, and get a lot of information very quickly. And they took the people about 5 minutes to fill out. So that's what those are. And then I actually downloaded the forms from QIAT Set, Georgia, and Wisconsin and put them in one Google folder. So that's what this document actually is just a link to a bunch of other documents.
Wow, you've done a lot of work for us. Thanks.
You're welcome. So you can get to these from this link, or you can get to them from our website. So, but we finally had time to actually explore some of that and on this webinar because we had time. So I just wanted to show you those resources that we've that are provided there. So,
and if you're putting professional development together for your district, these are all some great resources, and we encourage you to use things that we've created as far as the PowerPoint to have some professional development in your own districts.
Yeah. So, so that is really what we have today. I did want to mention, if we've kind of done this throughout where we've shared out. So thank you very much for being willing to interactively share out your strengths, your challenges, the resources, Linda. I would just encourage you to create at least 2 attainable goals for this year. When you're looking at this, I haven't really highlighted it on this one, but in those QIAT, in the indicators and the information on the indicators, there's some key questions under each indicator to look at and to consider. And
in the guiding document?
Yeah, in the guiding document. Thank you. I was blanking on that. So things like, if we go to, I'll just go to indicator 3, the key question. So that indicator is, the IEP illustrates that assistive technology is a tool to support achievement of goals and progress in the general curriculum by establishing a clear relationship between the student's needs, assistive technology devices and services, and the student's goals and objectives. So the key questions to ask yourself about that goal is, how would a person reading the IEP be able to determine what AT devices and services were considered and the basis of the decisions that were made? Another question is, how does the AT discussed in the process of consideration relate to the student's identified educational needs? So, and then third is, does the student's use of AT assist in the achievement of individualized goals? So, so they just have some key questions you can think about when you're looking at these processes. And each one of the indicators has those key questions. So that's another thing you can look at to help you as you're looking at professional development or as you're developing those processes.
I was thinking about a QIAT doc that has common errors that are made in each area. I don't remember which document it is, but I found that kind of helpful too.
I remember that as well, but I'm not recalling where it is.
Yeah.
Also, so maybe in the next webinar, we'll be thinking about that and locate that.
I know they talk about it throughout in their, you know, they'll sometimes just list it in different chapters. And so I didn't remember one that just does it in one full document, but that'll be great.
Well, it's for each area, so it'll have the indicators and then it'll have common errors for that area.
Right. So, and then, yeah, and so then our next one is on April 15th. We're doing these once a month. And so that is an implementation. So we hope you can join us for that. And then there is a case study for this one. It's Jolene's case study, and it's on page 78 and 79 if you have the book. And so, and like I say, I have found these case studies to be very helpful just in showing a real example of how they've used the indicators and helped out in a process for an actual real student. So